Good afternoon and welcome to everyone in the interwebs who will get to see this conversation later. We are the Unschooling Squad. My name is Ana Maria Luna Toporek, and I will let my sisters introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Lisa Guillard. Happy to be here.
And I'm Deanna Kluth, and we are the Unschooling Squad. Welcome to our guest. Lisa, you wanted to?
Yes, so we are so happy to have Jen Lemen with us today, the very first guest of the Unschooling Squad. Jen is a land artist, a writer, a mother, a beloved, a neighbor, and mentor. Her work centers on love, liberation, and ways to nurture rhythm, ritual, and routine into everyday life. Jen is a proponent and facilitator of healing together for the sake of our collective liberation. While Jen's children did attend school, her writing, philosophy, and practice are so similar to those of unschooling, and we're so excited to hear how these themes have been expressed and explored in her own motherhood, womanhood, work, and life. So thank you so much for being here and talking with us today, Jen.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So we have been meeting as a group for several months and just engaging in self-inquiry and sharing our own journeys, our struggles, our aha moments, and celebrating those insights with our kids and supporting each other. It started off basically as a support group, and so now we're sharing it with the world in public conversations, and now we're adding guests to really show the spectrum that unschooling and unschooling philosophy and living consciously in relationship with our children to foster joy in those relationships, how that can be for different people. So we'd just like to spend the next hour exploring and understanding and hearing some of your reflections and how they relate to our journey as unschoolers. So for the first thing that we thought we'd talk about is this understanding that so-called unschoolers would agree that unconditional love and support of parents enables learning. So in that context, being that you raised your kids in public schooling, how do you or did you and continue to nurture your relationships with your children in that context? How do you use unschooling themes as you understand them and practices in those relationships?
Well, if I had been in a different kind of marriage at the time, I would have been so happy for my kids to be at home with me and for us to be learning, from life moment by moment. But I didn't have that kind of marriage. I went on to get divorced. And so being in relationship with my kids felt like having them in school could easily become a stressor for that. And I didn't want it to be that way at all. So I really believe in unconditional positive regard. And so for me to center learning with them through life versus them performing well in school to get along with me or to please me, you know what I mean? Yeah. Was really important to me. So in their preschool years and their early years, we had like a really nature-rich relationship. We'd gone outside and spent a lot of time, and everything was like, what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? And so as they moved towards going into traditional schooling, we had to find a way to be that way together, even though we were separated for so many hours in a day. And it was stressful for them, to be in school. It wasn't their favorite thing. But for them to come home and not be put in a million programs or not have to do be scheduled and programmed from the morning until the night. They could come home, they could have a snack, they could eat, and then they could just run and play and learn the things that they wanted to learn. And I think the thing that was important for me to nurture my relationship with them was to be with them, no matter what they were going through, in a spirit of like non-judgment and honoring that they had their own experiences as humans. And even though they were younger and had different developmental tasks, and they weren't fully formed in the sense that, their brains are still developing, their bodies are still developing, that they still had a lot of wisdom and a lot of things to share, and their curiosities were important. And so being like a loving mirror of that, and really wanting to understand like what is their experience like as a 5-year-old, as a 7-year-old, as an 8-year-old, and to be together in that way was really important to me. And I'll say this, it's funny to see them now because they're 19 and 22. And when I see them with little children, it's very touching to me because I hear the echoes of my voice, and like they treat little children like very seriously, very respectfully. They're curious about what little kids are saying. They aren't harsh or judgmental or controlling. And I was, at the time as a parent, I was like, I hope that they're getting the message, like I hope they know that I love them like this and I want to be with them like this. And they're very introverted kids. They're not super expressive kids now. They're not, they're at these ages where they're not going to come home and tell me like, Mom, you were fantastic at that, but I see the fruit of that in how they really got every single little thing that I taught them by how they are with other children now.
In unschooling, something that we've learned in our journey is this idea of the beginner's mind being so important and integral in being able to be in relationship with children. Because when we do have beginner's mind, as you mentioned, there's this space of just full curiosity, and you yourself allowing permission to yourself to learn along with them. And I love the way that you just described that, this piece about really feeling inspired to be in relationship with them through their experiences and through their becoming, which I think is very different, a different angle to take in our relationship of parenting with our children, right? Where we are more in partnership rather than in an authoritative state in relationship. I love that. Thank you. That gift. How did you get to that? Like, I would love to hear this journey to that place.
Well, when I got pregnant, I read all the books, and I would go to Barnes and Noble every Saturday with my husband. I would like get a stack, and I would just kind of like skim through everything, and like just kind of like looking for like, where's my spot? Like, where can I land? And I had been raised in a very strict way, kind of severe way with children, where there's a lot of harshness and a lot of emphasis on punishment and controlling children. And my parents weren't necessarily that way so much, but we were in learning environments and religious environments that were very, very restrictive to kids. And I discovered attachment parenting that was like, continuum concept, attachment parenting. I was like, oh, this is the best. I really loved that. And when I had my daughter, my mother used to say like, do you think I can hold her? And I'm like, in a little while, I held the baby all the time. I had no shame. And my sister was a preschool teacher, and she was studying Piaget, all of these different learning philosophies about learning by experience. And I just loved that thing intellectually and emotionally. I just had like a natural affinity for it. But I think the real reason that I got on this path was my neurodivergence. So I'm not a neurotypical person at all. I don't want to give my diagnoses because I don't even know if they're valid or real, and I don't want to give into those classifications. But it's really clear to me now as an older woman that I absolutely was processing very differently. And so there was a natural thing to my benefit to lean into experience versus trying to conform to an ideal or making my children conform to an ideal, that if we could just share an experience and learn from our experiences, there's no problem. Like, we could discover and find our way together. And that just felt good in my body. Like, it felt good and it was fun. You know, it was enjoyable. There was pleasure in it. And it just resonated. And that kind of autonomy and agency that it nurtured was something I wanted for my own self. And it was a kind of attachment repair for me to do that thing with my kids in a really gentle way.
I love how you describe that as attachment repair. We've been talking a lot the last month or so about reparenting and how we're doing that as we are raising our kids. I wonder if there's any more that you can elucidate for our viewers about some of these patterns that you've had to break to, you know, as you discovered, right? It's one thing to be like, oh yes, I love this concept, I feel this in my heart, but then putting it into practice, you know, those habits of what we've learned and embodied as, you know, how we should parent, or just things that come out of our mouth, you know, speaking for myself. What was your experience with that, and how did you undo, what are you still undoing from your childhood upbringing as a parent?
I think at the time, I really did not understand how important secure and detachment was, or I knew a little bit about reparenting. Like, I read a book by a woman named Jean Isley Clark called Growing Up Again. And she talked about how at each developmental stage, children need to hear certain messages. And as I was reading that book, I was thinking like, oh, I did not get that message. And it uncovered for me that I actually have like pretty severe attachment ruptures, disrepair from my really early infancy, like prenatal, like how we were raised as infants and babies. And so because of that, I think that formed some of my neurodivergence. It kind of imprinted me. And it also is a trauma imprint of like a wound that I carry. So in some ways, I didn't have the imprinting to unlearn because I could never map correctly on the way that I was supposed to be, if that makes any sense. And so it was a matter of survival for me. Like, it was just easier for me to go in this one vein. It wasn't ideological. It was very somatic. It was like really lived in my body and what felt comfortable. And I know that's not true for everyone, but because of the nature of my early trauma as a baby, as a young child, that's where I landed, you know? And I think that the biggest thing that I had to unlearn was about my relationship with other people, about my parenting. So I was not doing it like my mom had parented me. And I wasn't parenting the way people around me were parenting. I didn't know anyone who was parenting similarly to the way that I was. And so that put me in tension and some conflict. And the biggest thing was like really unlearning that need for approval and belonging by conforming to an external standard or norm that didn't have any resonance for me. And that was really hard. And the way that I dealt with that as a young parent was I just isolated. I was like, let me not spend a lot of time getting this negative feedback. Let me kind of protect my little cocoon of myself emerging as a parent. I had I think that was probably the hardest part. And then just the hardest part for me even now is like dealing with ableism, like these judgments in society around neurotypical ways of learning, processing, thinking, expressing. And I'm still discovering like how much ableism, like these messages like get it together, get with a program, get in line, do what you're supposed to do, come on, get serious, you don't really want, these kind of judging, shaming things I took internalized as like I have a bad character, like I'm I can't get it together as, you know, to conform. But I actually recognize them now, that they were a form of ableism, of really judging people who kind of need to go at it differently because of how their thinking is or because of how they're formed. Please ask me questions if this doesn't make any sense.
For the viewers who aren't seeing all the rest of us, we're sitting here nodding our heads up and down the whole time you're talking.
Yes, I have a big yes.
I just want to thank you for not only just sharing this language and this information, but also your personal story, and just in that context, it's really resonate for people to hear that and feel so like a relaxing of the nervous system. I can imagine some people feeling this, hearing you speak, also identifying, you know, that you didn't have the imprint to undo. It just felt natural, and that, you know, pulled you into it, and then to have to face being different in a society and making the different parenting choices and all that. It's gonna just thank you. Resonate.
I mean, that resonated so much with me. Also, your bit about like what you said about ableism, because I think even as an unschooler, even someone who, you know, my oldest only went to nursery school for just a few short months, and, you know, I've been doing this for a really long time. You know, there are still, even myself, like when I first discovered unschooling, I was like, yes, you know, I can just be nice to my kids and they're going to learn. But I was still looking for learning to look like school, like to look like schooling versus like an individual journey, an individual, like based on your experiences and your abilities. And that, you know, was something that I'm still unraveling as my kids get older. Like, and every time I come back to it, or it'll, you know, I'll get hung up on something like that. I've recently been feeling the same thing. Like, this is ableism. It's like there's this system of how we're all supposed to be, but it's defined by one way of being, and we're all individuals. And what do we name that? And yes, being able to like identify that as ableism, that just really unlocked something for me. So thank you.
Yes, and I think that for me, what I really caught there, Jen, and that was really powerful, is, and particularly in relation to this conversation where we are sort of theming it in conversations about living and learning. And what I felt like I caught there, I'm just like trying to embrace it so much and hold it forever, is that in some way you discovered yourself through this process. And somewhere along the trauma, somewhere along the work that you did to acknowledge these tight places within you, you were able to uncover your own way of learning, your own process. And I would just love to hear more about that, because I think a part of what we are learning as we've had these beautiful conversations that are really about holding each other into that healing is how we learn as well as how we unlearn. And I would just love to hear you expand a little bit on that for your journey as what I named earlier. I wrote to my co-partners and sisters this idea of walking into empowered womanhood. And as I hear you speaking, I'm just like, this chick is an empowered woman. And I'm just so excited about that. So if you can just give us some of that goodness.
Oh, okay. There's so many stories I could tell you. I think I would do a disservice to not tell you one little story, because when my kids were your kids' ages, Deanna, like 9 and 12, maybe a little bit younger, I met a woman from Rwanda who was held against her will by a diplomat, and she was here in the United States, and she was in a really tough situation. She and I became friends, and through a series of events, we were able to make a plan for her to escape this, you know, labor violation, this very difficult situation, and start her life over. And for the next 2 years, she and I were very close. And I ended up going back and forth between here and Rwanda until I was able to bring her children back to her. And I tell you this story for this point because it was a real turning point for me as a parent. Like, I had intuitively been doing this, very naturally, organically, but she introduced some ideas to me that were very pivotal for me. And one was it was really collectivism, that we are all in this together, that togetherness can be a very serious both strategy and grounding force to help us in our personal formation and also the formation of our families and our culture and society. And the word for this in Kinyarwanda is turi kumwe. It means we are together. Turi, hey, where are we? Turi kumwe, we are together. And learning from her and her family about this idea of togetherness shifted my focus from thinking of myself as a parent as like an individual parent on a personal journey. Instead, I started seeing myself as like one of many mothers that were parenting for the sake of the well-being of our neighborhood, our culture, our society. And when you look at it like that, it took me out of this zone of like, how when you're a mom, you're like, am I doing a good job? Do they know that I love them? Am I getting through my stuff? Like, am I growing enough? And there's a way you can kind of turn inward and be really just self-obsessed in a way, like really worried about your performance. And this kind of shifted things for me. And it was less about me individually, my personal development, and it was more about my relationship to the world. And that sounds like so abstract, but the way that it manifested for us was we had a neighbor on one side and neighbors on the other, and the one neighbors were older and the other neighbors were younger, and we were the ones with little kids. And for 7 years, for 4 or 5 nights a week, we had an unintentional community. We never had a meeting. We never had made agreements or anything. And we just, every couple nights, someone would say, hey, what are you guys doing for dinner? We're going to do this. Oh, do you want to come eat with us? As if it were a surprise, even though we did this 5 nights a week for 7 years. And we just kept joining and being together. And something shifted in my parenting. I went from being like, I have to be the perfect mom to like really give my kids the ideal experiences so that they turn out okay, to being like one adult of many adults who really loved my children, who cared about my kids. And we were interacting with the kids like communally, collectively in this informal, casual, but really loving way. And it shifted my learning, because I was unlearning a hyper individualism and like performance as a parent. And as I unlearned that, I started to learn presence, and I started to learn radical hospitality, and I started to learn sharing, and sharing even my kids with other people. And that shift did something to thinking about togetherness as a way to move forward and as a way to learn, so that all of a sudden everything's like a collaboration. Like dinner's a collaboration. Whose house? How are we going to do the food? The kids are a collaboration. Do you want to do this with the kids or that? And there's like this togetherness of like learning and problem solving and figuring things out that just shifted the whole thing. And you have to tell me how that lands for you, but it's like, it really was a game changer for how I saw myself as a mother, and also how I saw my kids as learners, because it was less about their academic, their schooling, and it was more about could they learn how to be, in the world with me, with others? Could they learn from other people? Could other people learn from them? I'll tell you this one little story. One of the kids in that little group got in trouble once at someone else's house because she was hanging around the grown-up table, and the other mothers were like, what is this kid doing? She should leave, And the mom of the little girl called me, and she's like, what, do you think I should do something? I'm like, no, our children have lived at the grown-up table their whole lives. They've listened to the stories, they've been together, and they understand that what they have to say has value in those settings. And they were socialized in a very different kind of way. And we all were, because We weren't trying to get the kids to do something and control the kids and keep them over here and make them be a certain way. We were learning like how to be together, all of us. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what comes up when you ask it.
So beautiful. So moving. It's like repairing that rift of separation from community as it can be, to raise children and to, you know, keep our spirit whole. It's just so beautiful, and that it happened organically is almost miraculous.
Well, I would even say that there is the organic aspect of it, but there's also, I feel, quite an intentional energy about the way you went about it as well. And, you know, thank you for sharing your experience in terms of experiencing divorce and that type of separation, because I do feel as women that we, in an experience of separation, that there's knowledge within us about the importance of community. You know, I was raised with a single mom as well, and I just remember how intentional she was about bringing people into my life that can function as support. You know, like she did her best to be mom and dad, or just like super mom in many ways, but she didn't do it alone. And it was the context of community that she created that was incredibly important. And I do just want to honor that. Like, I really heard an intentionality that you brought to that experience, that I thought was really powerful. And thank you for sharing that.
I have to say that the intention around it for me was really around my marriage, because I got divorced after that, because I felt like it was too much pressure on my marriage for it to just be the two of us. And having, because we were very different, you know, we didn't have the easiest marriage, but there was something about being with older people and people who felt like younger siblings to us, like brothers and sisters, that took some of the tension and pressure out of that dyad, you know? And that was my hope, that this community, that was where the intention part, the kid part just happened really naturally, and all the benefit of that. And eventually my marriage wasn't able to sustain that, you know, but that carried us for a really long time.
Beautiful. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
How did you see your, because we're talking about, you know, unschooling in the context of the children being in public school, and we're hearing about how you parented and their community, and like, so all of this very attached parenting, very close to unschooling philosophy is just, they're saturated with it, they're steeped in it. What was the bridge with schooling, and how, you know, what was the language around that? You know, I know you touched upon it, saying that you didn't make them sign up for anything extra and there was no pressure from you. But as they grew, especially, you know, older, and maybe felt pressures of college, or, you know, probably not from you, but in general, right? They start thinking about the world. Just would love to take a peek at what life was like for them through your eyes, in terms of the learning.
Well, their transition to school was difficult because they had such rich preschool experiences that my daughter got to kindergarten. She's like, when are we going to start learning? We just sit down and we write things on papers, but we haven't done any learning yet. Like, we haven't gone outside. We didn't do any science. Like, she's like, what is the learning? You know, so they had a little bit of a hard time getting into it because they didn't recognize what was happening at school as learning. And so, like, I had a really poignant conversation with my son as a second grader, and he was just like, what is this? You know, and I said, listen, I'll just speak to you all frankly to make of this what you will. I'm like, listen, this school thing is like the best childcare system they thought of. Like, I have to get my work done and do my work. You're going to go to school and they're going to keep you safe at school. I don't care at all about your grades or about anything that you do there. Like you don't have any pressure for me. But what I would ask of you is that while you're there, you would pay attention and really listen for something that you want to learn that's important to you. And then you can come home and we can explore that, or you can explore that, and you can learn that way. And that really clicked for him. And he's just an amazing autodidact. Like, he's an incredibly self-taught human. So that really stuck with him. And that's really how he is his own learner, for sure. And for him, as he progressed, he had a harder time when he got into high school. He was in really big high schools, like 4,000 kids, like, and it just did not work for him. And he really encountered some hard times. And I pulled him out for like 6 months to just kind of help him get his ground. And then he was like, Mom, I really want to go to school, but I need to go to a small school. So I took him out and I put him in private school, which was hilarious because I did not have any kind of cash for that kind of thing. And I just hustled to keep this kid in school. And he went into a school that was really honoring of his difference and of his desire to learn. And that he was there for 1.5 years, and that did wonders for him, just in terms of like personal development, coaching, mentoring, like managing his time, learning how to organize things. And I think that was really a positive experience for him. My daughter, she was a different kind of learner than he was. He was an avid reader. He was like a classic, the kind of kid just kind of suck in information. She just didn't like school at all, and she didn't care. And she had a lot of anxiety about going. And so I felt like all those speeches I gave him didn't work on her. And she just didn't want to go, So we made deals, so to kind of keep her in those programs. And I think that she figured out socially what she liked about it. And so socially that's kind of where her mind was. But when she got to be like in 10th grade, she was just like, this is same thing, like the 9th grade, like high school thing. She just was not having it socially. He wasn't having it academically. She wasn't having it socially. It was like too much pressure. And she really begged to be unschooled. And I let her read the Teenage Liberation Handbook, and she was like, I want this life, and her dad was not having it. We were divorced by this point. And so I ended up putting her in a really alternative school. She and I talked our way into a scholarship. I was like, listen, we have to really make this thing work. And she went to a school where she like knitted every day and went on walks, and she learned how to meditate. And those skills, that experience in that school really imprinted her for the future when she thought about college. And they both wanted to go to college, but for different reasons. They wanted to learn, and they wanted to have exposure to more options of things. It was really their self-driven choice. And so he's in school now, very much a learning kind of school. And she went for 1 year, and then she went to a goat farm and did like a little volunteer thing. And she's like, Mom, guess who has no problems at all? Like, I have no anxiety, I have no ADHD. Guess who's completely fine if they live on a farm? I'm like, I know. And so she had her own experience of like, oh, I really don't need that world at all. But for her, it was a little trickier because she could see what I lost as a single mom by being out of the system, by really rejecting those formal ways of learning, and how I suffered in my social group and in my family. And she was scared of that. She was like, let me see if I can get back in here and do the system. But she's getting ready to graduate, and now she wants to be a midwife. So she's like, okay, I checked my boxes. I did everything that my dad wants me to do. Let me go back into the wild now, and be my own person. So I fully expect her to be, living out on the land, learning how to catch babies. But they found their own way. It was really important for her to go all the way back into that system. She had to go back to public school. We only kept her in that little school for 1 year. I couldn't pull it off the second year. And it was hard for her to go back. But she needed to kind of make sure she could do both sides, where my son doesn't really care at all. Like, he's his own, he's on my program 1,000,000,000% on just teaching yourself. And she's trying, because she's more social, trying to that societal piece matters to her more.
That societal piece is a big challenge, I think, for our collective evolution as humans. Thank you for sharing all those insights. I can't let this conversation end without diving deeper into inquiry for all the variety of situations and scenarios and socioeconomic, class and race, all these obstacles and real life-threatening challenges that some people have to are just have to deal with in parenting, that might impede them from saying, oh yeah, I can unschool. No, how could they possibly, they might think. And I'm wondering if in this conversation, having lived through your own journey as a single working mother and with this philosophy, what wisdom or what insight or what can you conceive of, even if you don't know, can you share with people out there to either encourage this paradigm shift in how we relate to kids, or how we might raise them or allow them to learn, or whatever language you choose? I think you catch my drift.
I think that there's two pieces I would want to say around this. One is we're so have our eye on those systems, right? And there's this worry, like, if I really pull these kids out, or if I do things differently, will we suffer in these systems? There's that piece of it. And then there's just the piece of them like getting to be themselves and thriving. And I personally don't think these systems have anything for us, like, at all. That's like that's my personal bias. And we still have to negotiate with them. And so I don't think that we're meant to do that alone. I think that we're meant to do that together. And I don't think that we can raise kids the way that we were meant to originally without each other. And so I would say, like, the number one thing is to like find one mom or two moms and just be like, I got you. And I'm here for these kids, and to have each other's backs. And that is the most secure environment that children can ever ask for learning. Secure attachment is the foundation of risk-taking. And kids can't take chances to learn unless they know that we've got them. And if we can't do that with each other, that's a problem. So we have to work through whatever our issues are, or not work through them and just say, we're doing it anyway. You know what I mean? Like I got you, I'm here no matter, and like my stuff's my stuff, whatever. But really, really centering the community of even just two moms and kids can change everything for those kids and everything for those moms. And don't think for a second that that's not radical or really powerful. It's plenty. And as these systems like dissolve, fall apart, are compressed, and all these things happen in these systems, it will be relationships and friendships and the confidence that when I need something, I can ask for it. And when I need help, I can say, and if something's bothering me, I can talk. And having experiences of mutuality, so that's not just one direction, right? So we're not centering our kids so hardcore that they don't know how to make space for each other and for us. And like learning how to keep that balance, and being friends with another mom will help you do that balance, because that mom's not going to center her kids the way that you do. And learning how to like work with each other and be together. And I just think that that is so critical. And this is, there's class issues here. There's people who have the ability to not worry about their finances. And I was so poor doing these things. Like, once I fell from grace and got that divorce, like I did not recover for years and years and years. And yet being together and togetherness is so much, it's such a powerful, stabilizing thing. it made up for so many things that we did not have. And so I think that if you're a mom who has some of those privileges, look for the moms who don't and say like, hey, okay, let's do this together. Because that mom knows how to get her kids to do stuff. She knows how to get those kids how to clean up. Like the mom who doesn't have as much window or, you know, as much buffer as you do has things to teach you, and you can share your privileges, you know, or whatever direction it's going in. It's like that togetherness is how we learn how to be human, and how we help our kids learn what it's like to be, you know, together. I think that's the total foundation of all learning, is feeling secure, being in it together, and having to like work together, like collaborate, figure stuff out. I think that's the whole thing.
That was so powerful, Jen. I have chills. My entire body says yes to all of that. And I also really just was able to feel the abundance, that the perception of abundance behind your words. You know, like we often, I will speak for myself, that I often get stuck in this place of lack. And that was the biggest hurdle for me to actually to really expand from, was just this feeling of lack, and not being able to see the ability to produce and engage with that abundance. But what you just shared is actually coming to this basis of, even in a situation of stress and challenge, that there's abundance. And I just loved that you focus and you zeroed in, and even within two relationships, there's abundance, two families, two people, and that you can really emerge from that so much healthier and better as a collective. That was really, really powerful.
I want to, thank you so much. I want to add one thing. Like, it's, my kids know this in their bones. Like they are operating in their little clans of friends now as young adults. And they really know that togetherness is like, that's the only way. Mm-hmm. Even my son, who's like mostly online, has a little posse of boys. Mm-hmm. And they're real tight, and they talk about real stuff, like they're real friends. And my daughter lives in a little group house with a bunch of her peers, and they know that. And the other thing they know from this is collaboration. Mm-hmm. They really know how to collaborate, and that didn't come from school. That came from being in relationship with people who respected them, and them seeing grown-ups like care about them.
Yes.
And being able to improvise. I just wanted to slide that in there while there's still time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel this grounding that you've laid for us in terms of thinking and growing from a place of secure attachment. I mean, just amongst the three of us lately, this has been the center of our conversations lately, right? Of really uncovering that hurt within us that didn't have secure attachment. So it's just so synchronistic that would be such a focal point of your sharing today, which it's such a gift to those of you who will be listening. I just feel like it's such a gift. And is there anything, you do such beautiful coaching work, we haven't even gotten a chance to really highlight that, but is there a way that if someone feels really called to begin to look at that within themselves and within their relationships with the children, is there like a starting point that you suggest, and also how can they get into your work and follow you and all that?
I teach a class called Path of Devotion Basics, and it's about returning to body, land, community, and each other. Body, land, nature. I can't remember the list now. And there's one coming up, I think it's like September 22nd, and it's pay what you can. No one has ever turned away around cash. And it's just a 10-day little sampler on like how to ground in these principles. Mm-hmm. But something that might, you know, if you can do that or not, I think the most valuable thing that I teach that I think parents can think about is the 3 R's, which are rhythm, ritual, and routine. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when we're trying to reclaim our agency and sovereignty, we let go of routine, because we want there to be like expression and freedom. But it is rhythm, ritual, and routine that actually helps regulate the nervous system. And that provides a somatic ground for kids so that they can feel in their body like the cadence of rhythm. So I think the number one thing parents can do is like work on those rhythm, rituals, and routines. And I wasn't great at this, like, because it's very difficult for me. But now as an older woman, I'll be 52 in the next month. I'm aware of how my kids reach for that now, because it's a little bit of a gap that we didn't have the whole way. And they know that rhythm, ritual, and routine is what can ground them in what they know and who they want to be, and give them that like somatic thing. So I would say like simple things like bedtime, waking up, eating together, doing things with meaning, like letting there be like a little rhythm or cadence to your day, even if it's loose or unconventional or different, can really help build some consistency and some predictability, so that somatic body piece can kind of land. And I sometimes teach I sometimes teach 3 R's for emergency, for when everyone's like, we have no 3 R's, or on 0, I teach that sometimes. Then I teach like a regular 3 R's. And that's something you can collaborate with your kids. You can make little lists, like, what do you think our 3 R's should be? And I made my kids thousands of lists growing up. We sat down and made plans and tried to decide what felt good to us. And I think that stuff's really important.
And how can people reach you and find out about those courses?
Oh, I'm so bad at this part. Okay. You can email me at jen.lemen@gmail.com. You can get on my newsletter at thepathofdevotion.com. Those are probably the best. You can follow me on Facebook. You can friend me on Facebook. I'll friend you right back. I'm pretty accessible, and I try to be really available as an older woman with moms. And if there's like something is coalescing, like, okay, I've talked to 5 moms this week and everyone's on the same thing, then we would probably create an environment where we could learn something together. But Path of Devotion, that group, like that community and that teaching there is really cozy, and it's real supportive for people who want to bring this thread through their whole lives, like every aspect of their lives.
So lovely. Thank you. And we'll share, we'll write your information also in the description notes. Is there anything that in closing you would like to talk about or share?
I really would just like to say Metta for everyone who's listening, if that's okay.
Yes.
Because we can try to do these things correctly, but it's like we feel it, it's from a different place. So I like to put my hand on my heart or my hand on my belly, and I just want to say Metta for all the parents. May your learning and your unlearning be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to your unlearning. May no difficulty come to your unlearning. May your unlearning and your learning always meet with miraculous success. May your learning and your unlearning also have patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome the inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures of these systems and human life. May you always remember as you're learning and unlearning that you are connected to a source that can never be absent. And because of this, through this whole process, you are held, you're healed, and you and your little ones are being transformed.
Beautiful.
Oh, amen. Thank you, Jen, for just such beautiful tenderness and insight and wisdom and guidance.
Thank you for
sharing your stories.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about it.
And just thank you so much for really modeling just this path of growth, of self-acceptance. Yeah, it's just beautiful to see you on that other side. That I think I myself, I'm really working and walking towards, and just to know that there's those placeholders on the other side is really powerful for me. So I just thank you for that modeling for us.
Much. I'm so inspired by just the language even that you use in describing all of this. It's just so warm and so, I don't know, reassuring, and right, I guess like it's that, experience of having been through it. Your kids are grown, and yes, just like Maria said, thank you for modeling that, because it really is, I don't know, it's a gift, just to see like and hear that it was all worth it, like it's all hard work, but worthwhile work. And yeah, we're all benefiting from it. So thank you so much.
And that was beautiful, Lisa, because and it just like turned something on in my brain, which is just that beautiful focus, Jen, that you have in the continuum of your relationships, that somewhere through this work, you were able to heal not only yourself and your relationship with your children, but just like so much before you, right? That in this relationship that you now have with your beautiful babies, you've repaired so much in your genetic code, I feel, right? And
I hope so. May it be so.
And certainly all kind of in an unschoolish way.
So much. For sure.
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I think that all of us, and we've had this conversation, that while we use the language of unschooling, I think all of us really deeply understand that this is our birthright, right? Being able to be learners in relationship to each other, to nature, to our environment, and to the source of creativity as well, and imagination, that this is our birthright. And we, through the ages, we've named it different things, but in the end, it's really just this natural way of really listening to our hearts and to those connections.
Absolutely. The systems of school and everything else that we were talking about that really don't serve life are only a recent phenomenon. And like, it's just, yeah, vision a new future in how we raise our kids, and they will carry the torch onward. So on that note, thank you so much for this beautiful first of hopefully many conversations about learning. Have a blessed evening.
Yes, Jen, all the best to you and your family.
Thank you.
As you, there's Freddie. And yeah, and to your son and his new journey in college. That's exciting. Wishing all the best.
We will definitely also let you know when we are posting this in our socials, just so that you know if you wanted to share it yourself. Yeah, we'll plug you in with that.
Perfect.
Beautiful.
All right. Thank you for that metta meditation. Blessings to you and to my sisters.
Yes.
So nice to be with you. I have to go. I hate to end so abruptly.
Oh, we're done. It's 8 o'clock.
Yes, I have to get on the next call. But it was so nice. It was so nice to talk to you. And it was, my kids are older and like, they're not always friendly. You know what I mean? Like, I love them and they're doing great. So it was just so nice to like remember all the sweet things. You know what I mean? Like remember the path to get here, because it really was a beautiful journey. So I really appreciate you guys asking me to do this.
Well, we might need you back a little bit later in our conversations because I feel like there's so much more
Oh,
there.
yes.
Anytime, anytime. I'm here for you. Anytime.
Awesome.
Thank
For
you,
real.
Jen.
For real. That's how I roll.
Beautiful. All right, honey. Have a beautiful
Bye.
night.
Bye. Love you. Bye.